Proud people of the Empire State, from the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
All right, welcome everyone to Radio Free New York. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us. For longtime listeners of the show will know that one of the interesting issues that I like to dive into that doesn't usually get talked about in kind of conservative and libertarian circles is urbanism. I live in a city. I live in the city of Rochester. I like talking about and thinking about local government in a smart, comprehensive way. How do we create great, strong, livable cities? And that's why I'm so excited for our guest today. So we brought in Mr. Charles Marohn, who is the founder of Strong Towns and author of a book that I'm really enjoying, is Strong Towns, a Bottom-Up Revolution to Rebuild American Prosperity. Ms. Marohn, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been to Rochester and like it a lot, so it's great to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a great mid-sized city that, I know a lot of people in the listening area sometimes are skeptical of, but I love living here in this area, and I'm excited to see oftentimes how your work is applied to activists in the Rochester area. But before we go too much into that, for listeners who don't know, who are you and what is Strong Towns all about?
I appreciate that. Well, I'm an engineer and I'm a planner, and actually started my career doing engineering, added a planning background because I didn't feel like I was a very good engineer. I needed some more planning knowledge to do the kind of work I was doing, and really intended to do that for my life. I mean, that I enjoyed the work. I liked working for cities, doing development projects and roads and sewer extensions and planning new developments. It was in doing that work that I started to question the financial implications of it, the way that we were building our cities, and the projects that I was working on specifically didn't seem to make a lot of financial sense to me. I could see where the city would make money in the short term, but I also saw how the city was taking on these enormous long-term liabilities. And I was working for many cities across Minnesota where I'm at. In 2008, and it seems like such a long time ago now, but it actually was very recent. The economy was crashing down, banks were collapsing, cities were experiencing enormous financial hardships that would only get worse in the years after that. And the businesses that I was working on and the cities that I was working for were cutting way back. And I had been telling them for years, like, this stuff we're doing doesn't make a lot of sense. But everybody wanted to grow. And now all of a sudden they were cutting back. And the first thing they cut back on was the consulting engineer, the consulting planner. So my business, dropped by 80% in a very short period of time. And I found myself very frustrated with life, frustrated with where I was at. And I didn't really know what to do. And so as kind of a therapy thing, I sat down, I started to write. And I started to write about what I was seeing going on, why I was seeing our city struggle. And, instead of the approach that we were being given, like, let's invest in more infrastructure, let's build more, let's have the federal government come in and bail us out, what we should be doing instead. That blog started in 2008, has grown into Strong Towns. And you referenced the book. We publish 3 articles a day. Each weekday, we have 3 different podcast streams. We're reaching a couple million people a year with our content, all based around this idea of how do we build strong, resilient, financially responsible cities from the bottom up.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And that seems like something that everyone can get around, right? Like we want strong and financially resilient cities. We need to have that, to have functional government, to have the basic services that we need to be able to build community. So, I mean, why have we gotten to this point over time of building cities that maybe don't meet those goals?
It's interesting because I think if we freeze the idea today, there's a challenge to the left, political left in our country, because we do focus a lot on financial resiliency, and we focus a lot on, making good financial decisions that have a payoff. And a lot of the irresponsibility financially that we see in cities today, I mean, a lot of the fragility that is being exposed right now in New York and in other states across North America and in our localities are a result of basically fiscal imprudence, not bothering about your budget, not bothering about your long term. And that is a challenge to the political left. On the other hand, we talk about cities, and oftentimes conservatives, look at cities and just kind of write them off. These are places that are dominated by progressives and left-leaning people, and so let's just leave them alone and go away and set up our own enclave somewhere else. The reality is that both cities and suburban areas have engaged in the same experiment. It's an experiment that was set up by the federal government during the New Deal, in the decades after World War II. And it was a bipartisan consensus to create growth and prosperity and essentially a different version of America based on things like investing in infrastructure, investing in highways, subsidizing housing, creating programs that would build single-family homes. And what you wind up with is a hyper horizontal growth around cities, while within cities you wind up with this distorted hyper vertical growth. Both of those distortions are a far diversion from the way cities developed traditionally, which was incrementally over time, growing up, growing out, and growing incrementally more intense by market feedback. It was really the feedback of a marketplace, raising land values, creating redevelopment pressure, and making a place kind of thicken up into something that I think today we can think of as like a town. Or, if you go to a small town, you see kind of this mix in some places that haven't been completely atrophied. You could see this in downtown Rochester and some of the surrounding neighborhoods. But this is a pattern we walked away from. And we walked away from it because it creates growth. It allows our economy to grow very, very quickly. The problem is it creates growth by giving us enormous long-term liabilities. Now we have this huge area we have to provide police and for fire protection to. Now we have all these roads we have to maintain. We have all these pipes we have to maintain. When you add up all those costs, it's incredibly expensive. I mean, it's ridiculously expensive. And we see cities struggling under the weight of this. And the advice they're given then is, well, grow some more. And the reality is when we grow unproductively, when we take on a lot of liabilities for a little bit of growth today, we can't help but becoming more and more insolvent, further bankrupt as time goes on. And that's really what we're experiencing on a broad scale in North America.
Yeah, and I really liked your article series on the growth Ponzi scheme too. Just kind of this idea like, okay, well, we've built this infrastructure. We can't quite afford it anymore. It's going through its second life cycle. It was funded and subsidized by the federal government or some other government, and now this local government's like, all right, how do we get our way out of this now? We overbuilt. We can't afford it. We double down, right? We get more grants. We expand, and if we just grow a little bit more, it's going to be fine next time around. But it isn't.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and the funny thing is I recognize this in our cities, way back in the mid 2000s, the early 2000s, because of the projects that I was working on. I mean, the cities that I worked with were generally smaller, and in smaller systems, the problems kind of bubble up more quickly. There's less slack in the system, so you can't hide this as well. But we see this now in big cities, and in fact, we see this, everywhere from the way the Federal Reserve has tried to engineer growth in our macro economy and just stay one step ahead of, the collapse, the deflation, by, just pumping more money in the system, to the way every city council is in a ridiculous fashion handing out subsidies and chasing that new growth while, there's potholes in the existing streets and the existing infrastructure is falling apart and our taxes are going up. And no one can really explain how doing more and more and more of what got us to this point is actually going to get us out of it. It's almost like a human pathological thing. And I actually do think that, sociology or human psychology actually is more informative on this than economics because, you go back to Popeye, Wimpy will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. That's a very human kind of instinct. We're kind of wired that way as human beings. This is why people smoke. It's why people, don't go to the gym and exercise, but instead eat fatty foods. We're a little bit wired this way. And when we collectively create an economic system that is designed to exploit that human flaw, as opposed to, push back on it and try to correct it the way we do in groups and as individuals, we wind up with the financial catastrophe we have today.
Yeah, and I want to dig a little bit more into that too. We're coming up on a break now, but I want to dig more into what are the political incentives and motivations to make that happen. I want to talk about the idea of the infrastructure cult, and maybe we'll start to move towards how do we think our way out of this. But thanks again for listening to Radio Free New York, folks. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Catch a wave at Waldameer.
Waterworld opens daily at 11 with a giant wave pool, water playgrounds, relaxing river, and exciting body and tube slides like the incredible new 6-lane Rally Racer. The Rally Racer is the longest, fastest slide in Waterworld. Come experience the excitement as you race your family and friends. And Waldameer opens at noon with a variety of thrill rides and family rides like the exciting new Whirlwind spinning coaster. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, Waldameer is limited to 50% capacity, so there's no free admission. Guests must purchase admission tickets at waldameer.com or at the park. Children under 1 are free. Face masks are required. So visit waldameer.com, purchase your admission tickets, and come have some fun.
Catch a wave, catch a day at Waldameer. Your wet and wild summer getaway. Excitement waits for you at Waldameer. Waldameer in Erie, PA.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. Thank you everyone for listening today. We're live noon to 1 here on WYSL. If you want to participate in this conversation, you have a question for Mr. Charles Marohn, give us a call, 585-346-3000. And also shout out to those listening down the line at WACK in Newark, and WENY, The Patriot, down in the southern tier. And of course, all of our friends who are listening online on YouTube, on Facebook. You guys are wonderful. Leave your comments in any of our streams. I'm looking at them. I'm seeing them. If you have any comments or questions, we'd love to have you participate in this discussion. Now, we were talking before the break kind of, about how we got to where we are. And, one of the interesting concepts of your book and something that I think we kind of hinted at is like there's a lot of this incentive for instant gratification with the infrastructure that we have now. People like seeing new roads. People like seeing new housing developments that go up sometimes in the middle of nowhere, even though it requires gas lines, water lines, electric lines, all that stuff to go out to that too, that needs to be maintained and updated decades from now. People like seeing that stuff. So with that type of mentality, with the mentality of politicians liking to do ribbon cuttings, of people liking to see those things, with all the political incentives we have, how do we think our way out of this and start to think in a different manner that might be more financially sustainable?
The subtitle of the book is a bottom-up revolution, and I really do believe that we are not going to get that kind of leadership from the federal government for sure, and not likely from the state government as well, because as you say, the incentives to deal with the thing in front of you and ignore the long-term consequences of that are really overwhelming. And, we have demonstrated, the United States in our affluence, in our power, in our wealth over the last, 2-3 generations has demonstrated that when we face a problem, and there's two ways to go. One way is to throw money at it. The other way is to actually deal with it and make some difficult structural changes, that it's easier and more palatable as a society to throw money at it. And we can blame politicians for that. And I think that, certainly politicians know how to speak to us in ways we want to hear. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is something that we have asked for. We have asked for these roads. We've asked for this infrastructure. We've asked for this building style. We've asked for the strip malls and the big box stores and the franchise restaurants and the frontage roads. And, this is something that they've provided to us because we've, given the thumbs up when they've done it. I think what we are quickly reaching, and it's not hard to see or to understand, is a point in time when not only can the federal government not sustain this. I mean, in New York, you're having conversations over pension funds and who should pay for these and whether it be a federal bailout or not. In the cities in your listening area, we're seeing, large budget gaps for next year because of the coronavirus fallout and the shifts in spending and what have you. And, will there be a federal bailout? Let's pretend there are federal bailouts for the short term. I think the idea of fixing the trillions and trillions of dollars of local infrastructure on top of the trillions of dollars of national infrastructure that we have, it's just not a long-term proposition. And so we're going to have to sustain this stuff on our own, and we don't have the money to do it. And not only do we not have the money to, we don't have the wealth to tap to do it. Even if we wanted to 100% tax ourselves, which is an absurd thing, but even if we wanted to do that, we couldn't pay for this stuff. And so ultimately, we are going to have to, at the local level, come to grips with what we've done. And I think at that point, there's going to be a lot of anger at politicians and a lot of frustration with the people of the past. But that anger and frustration isn't going to change the reality that we're going to have to deal with this. If we want that road maintained, we have to pay for it. If we want that pipe fixed, that money's going to have to come from us. And I don't know where that money is. And I don't think we're ever going to have it.
Yeah. I mean, when we're looking at, like, we're staring down the barrel of that stuff here, I think there's two interesting things that you've said here. One is that the preference for most people is to have this kind of, in theory, everlasting growth, right? People like the strip malls, people like the expansive suburbs, people like all this stuff, and we've kind of provided that over the years. So, my two questions are to one, why shouldn't people get that, right? And is there a way to make people pay for it? Because I always think, like, okay, if we're subsidizing these things, like, is this something that's realistic and sustainable in market conditions? And two, are you suggesting that, like, we should just let certain aspects of our infrastructure fail? Is that what we have to do?
Yeah. Let me give you an analogy. If we pretended that we were in the 1950s or 1960s and Tesla was a company back then, why would you buy Tesla stock? You would buy Tesla stock because you thought it was a good company that made good products, that its earnings potential, not only currently the dividends that it was paying, but the earnings that it had, were going to justify the stock price. And you would buy that, assuming that those earnings would continue to rise, and you would see that in terms of, like, the dividends you were going to receive. Why would you pay $1,700 a share for Tesla today? Tesla's valued at, more than GM, more than Ford together. It's fast approaching more than Toyota and Honda added onto that. The only reason you buy Tesla at $1,700 a share today is because you believe someone will buy it at $2,000 a share a month from now or 2 months from now. That's the difference between an investment and essentially a speculation. When we look at our cities, when we look at our neighborhoods, the homes we buy, the neighborhoods we build into, there's always a sense that even if this doesn't work out in a broad case, that I will be able to sell my property, I will be able to move to a better neighborhood, I will be able to essentially get out of this problem before it manifests. And I think a lot like the people who own Tesla stock, who believe, I don't care what the valuation, the underlying realities are, I just think this will go up. I think we're deluding ourselves at the local level. Will we give up some of these neighborhoods? Yeah. As hard as it may sound, we can go to a place like Detroit, which, as I explain in chapter 2 of the book, is basically just, a generation ahead of everybody else. You can look at a city like Detroit, and have they walked away from their sewer and water systems? Yeah. Have they walked away from roads? Yeah. Have they walked away from entire neighborhoods? Absolutely. When you don't have the money to maintain it, you don't maintain it. And Rochester today, and Utica, and Syracuse, and cities all over upstate New York have deferred maintenance, critical, urgent maintenance for decades. And those promises we think will be kept at some point. Like, okay, they might not fix my road this year. They might put off this upgrade for 5 years, but they'll eventually get to it. At some point, we're going to recognize that they're just not going to get to it. And that changes everything. It changes everything about how you look at your city.
Yeah, I mean, that's a frightening prospect for a lot of people. And I think from just kind of a political incentive, if you're a politician on a town board, county board, or state assembly person, or any level of government, really your inclination is, we can't let that happen. That is, the death of my political career if we start to see infrastructure failing. So they'll scramble and do whatever they can to continue doubling down on this investment.
Right, but let's go down to New York City, which, really as a per acre or per square foot basis is the highest concentration of wealth in North America. I mean, this is one of the wealthiest cities in the world. You've ridden their subways, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You've seen, the state of disrepair of much of their infrastructure systems. We will live with a long, slow decline for a long time before we make any difficult choices. Even in a place of enormous wealth, where ostensibly you have, this progressive ethic that will invest the money and will put the money in place to do this. I think you go to some of our smaller towns, you go to some of our mid-sized cities where you don't have that wealth, you don't have that capacity. and you proportionally actually have more public investment, as a proportion of your wealth, I don't think we make those decisions at all. I think we do experience that decline.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can shift to a more optimistic note after the break. But thank you so much, Charles Marohn, for joining us today here on Radio Free New York. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Here.
Twice the power. More powerful FM 92.1, FM 95.5 West, and 1040 AM WYSL Avon Rochester.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. Mainly clear, a little bit muggy. We'll see temperatures in the upper 60s to near 70. Some heat coming in for the weekend. Saturday, sunny and hot in the low 90s. Should be clear skies Saturday night. Very hot, hazy, and humid. Low to mid-90s on Sunday. Could be a thunderstorm Sunday evening into Sunday night. I'm Rich Cornelia, WYSL.
Only a fool would give up his guns and expect the government to protect him. The government can't even stop telemarketers. Let that sink in.
Because your future is worth it. MGM Associates Insurance. Proudly serving the region since 1984, MGM can meet your coverage needs, ranging from home, condo, and auto, all the way to specialized policies for business, workers' comp, to limo and taxi insurance, and coverage for tech professionals like IT specialists. They can also help lead you through the confusing maze in the new world of health insurance coverage and options. MGM Associates is large enough to serve you, but small enough to care, so you don't have to wait in line on some 800 number to get prompt personal attention. MGM Associates is the only winner of the National Best Practices Award 5 times in a row. MGM is proud to support veterans groups, including Heroes Home Advantage. For your personal, business, home, or professional insurance needs, put the experience of MGM Associates Insurance on your team. Locally and proudly owned at 1745 Penfield Road in Penfield. 381-7008 or mgminsure.com, an associate of Finger Lakes Fire and Casualty, Route 227 in Trumansburg, New York.
FM Talk.
Here's an important announcement from the Livingston County Department of Health. Protect your family from COVID-19. The method of spreading coronavirus is from person to person. Since no vaccine exists, it's important to take common sense steps to protect yourself and others. Avoid unnecessarily leaving your home. Cough or sneeze into your arm, not your hand. Consider wearing a face mask in public. Although children under 2, those with trouble breathing, or those who cannot remove the mask by themselves should not wear one. Maintain social distancing, at least 6 feet away from other people. Wash your hands frequently. Don't touch your face. Clean and disinfect frequently handled surfaces. Call your doctor at once if you have any of the COVID-19 symptoms: a fever, cough, shortness of breath, heaviness on your chest, or trouble breathing. For more information about the coronavirus, Google Livingston County Department of Health and COVID-19 or call 243-7299.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
For over 75 years, Villa of Hope has risen to meet the changing needs of our community. Caring staff at the Villa know trauma and how it can change your life. As we face personal challenges, the Villa stands as a place where individuals, youth, and families can rebuild relationships, recover potential, and renew hope for the future. For more information, visit villaofhope.org or call 1-833-993-HOPE.
Hi, this is retired Army Colonel Paul Simonelli, host of Valor Radio. Our show has a big tent. We welcome you, whether you're a current active military, retired reservist, National Guard, or veteran, all branches and civilians too. We cover it all, new developments, military history, and reviews of great books on the military. Join us for Valor Radio, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and Saturdays at 8 a.m. and podcast at WYSL1040.com.
Fix It via video, a new service leveraging years of experience and a live expert guiding you through known issues and how-to steps of troubleshooting for faster diagnosis to get you back mowing again. Check out fixitchat.live.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who is listening again on WYSL. And if you want to participate in this conversation, we're live here until 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Give us a call, 585-346-3000. And thank you, folks, for listening online, too, for contributing. Craig says, I love Strong Towns and Chuck. And Evan says, proud Rochester-based Strong Towns member here listening. And Steven says hi as well. So thank you, everyone listening. Thank you, everyone who is sharing this post. Really appreciate you contributing to the conversation. But leave your comments. Ask. You got Charles Marohn on. Ask some questions. And I'll get to one of the questions I got earlier this week. But just after our doom and gloom conversation, again, how do we figure our way out of this, right? Like, so maybe some of this stuff has to fail, but like, what's next? What's the solution?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the dollars and cents are going to drive this. I mean, we need to make better investments in our communities. And by better investments, what I really mean is that an investment where we spend $1 as a community, collectively we spend $1 and we get back more than $1. We get back something greater than that over the long term. If we were talking about a business and, I was saying to you, this business is in the red, it's losing lots of money. And you came to me and said, you know what, Chuck, what we should do is launch a whole nother division and let's borrow a bunch of money and let's put, money into this new division. We would, as shareholders, we'd vote you out. We'd say, that's insane. Like, why would we do that? We actually need to shore up what we do. We need to take what we do and do it better. We need to, do the small things. For cities, that looks a lot like things like planting street trees, fixing crosswalks, maintaining sidewalks. It looks a lot like fixing your zoning code so that people can make a little bit better use of their property without having, 2 years of red tape they have to go through. It looks like things like allowing a little bit of neighborhood-friendly commercial in neighborhoods where it's not allowed. This is a general platform for change that any city of any scale can do and see immediate results from. It's not like a huge budget constraint. Nothing that we need to do right now is going to require us to borrow tons of money. But it does require us to rethink what it means to have a neighborhood in a city. It doesn't mean having a static place that never changes. It means having a dynamic place that is going to incrementally grow and become more wealthy and more valuable over time. That's different than what we were sold post-World War II, but it looks a lot more like the traditional city, particularly when you think of a place like Rochester in its heyday. It looks a lot more like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because the conversations I see in my own neighborhood around some of that stuff. So, well, first of all, let me back up and say, it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is we don't need to make big investments in this type of stuff. It's mostly just remove some restrictions and kind of let people do what makes sense in areas, right? So in my neighborhood, it's mostly single family zoning, which means, for those of you who don't know, it restricts the buildings that are able to be in our neighborhood to single family housing. it's very difficult to build multifamily housing or commercial businesses or mixed use things in this area. And the city of Rochester recently came out with like a strategic plan that suggested an area a couple blocks away from where I live should be allowed to have more kind of mixed use or commercial properties, and people flipped they
out,
did
yeah.
not like it. Not at all.
Well, let me defend those people for a second as a way to, I disagree with them, but let me defend them a little bit. Right now, today in America, if you say loosen zoning restrictions or change some of those things, what people automatically think of is the large capital flow into the community. And so you have a choice between single family homes or multi-story apartment buildings. You have a choice between, a single family home or a gas station or a strip mall. One of the problems with the suburban experiment, the way we've been building since World War II, is that it only comes in these two sizes. It comes in the very hyper individual horizontal kind of growth, or it comes in these discrete units where large capital is pumped into them and they just are not compatible with our neighborhood. Here's what I would suggest people do. Go walk around to the older parts of your city. And in upstate New York and around, New York, you have all kinds of examples of great cities that were built prior to the Great Depression. Go walk around some of these neighborhoods and look at the form. What you will see if you look closely is that not only do you have single family homes, but you have homes that look the same, look basically like single family, that sometimes have 2, 3, 4 families in them. Sometimes they have, a little architect studio in the front or an accountant's office. Sometimes they might have a doctor's office or a dentist's office. Sometimes they might have a little, bodega kind of retail store in the front. These things were very, very common in historic development patterns, in, the traditional way that your city's built. When we allow those things to come back, what we see is that underlying land values start to increase, and it actually drives a reinvestment. It actually drives a natural, reinforcing wealth loop that makes these neighborhoods a better place to invest in. It makes them more prosperous and successful. It actually makes that wealth kind of distributed more broadly across your community, and it drives other investment. There's a little town in upstate New York called Oswego, and I may be saying that wrong. I've been there a couple times. Yeah, Oswego. Okay. That's how a New Yorker would say it. A Minnesotan might say Oswego. If you go there, they have a historic Renaissance group. I write about them in chapter 8 of the book. They have taken small amounts of private money, and they've used that small amount of private money to encourage basically incremental investment within their residential neighborhoods and seen millions and millions of dollars of return from it. This is all private sector. It's not government stuff. But it's people living in these kind of traditional neighborhoods, allowing them to organically flex and grow, and seeing enormous wealth for themselves and for the community simultaneously occur.
That's excellent. Now, it sounds like we've got a caller, John from Rochester. John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Kevin. Hey, Chuck. I've been in downtown Rochester as a worker, and I own my own company now, but since 1973, and I really I've seen big transition from 1973 to the present in housing downtown, both apartments, loft apartments, and also townhouses. It's quite a dramatic change and a good change. And the cool thing is, I live in the suburbs. I'm within 15, 20 minutes away. I've got a creek in my yard. So I get to experience the best of both worlds, the urban, and I work a lot, so I'm downtown probably 7 days a week. And I enjoy the downtown atmosphere, but it's great to get away out in the suburbs where you got trees, you got the creek, and that type of thing. It's a perfect thing. The question I have for you, Chuck, is with this latest controversy we have and problems we have with the COVID outbreaks, and now we've got rioters that are looting and whatever, even in downtown Rochester, I guess we may have something developed someday. Have you changed your line of thinking a little bit regarding downtown versus suburban development just based upon the safety issue?
All right. Yeah, thanks for your question, John. I really we appreciate it. So, Chuck, what do you think, particularly in response to the coronavirus? We're seeing a lot of people now who they're nervous about living in close proximity to a lot of folks, and they now have options. Everyone's doing a remote commute now. I'm doing a remote commute. I don't have to actually physically go into my job anymore. So does this change the nature of living in cities? And what about folks like John who want to live out in the suburb, have that natural area, and just commute in? Is that okay? Is that sustainable?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in an American context we have a lot to work out here. We have a lot to work out, and I'm going to say some things, and I don't say these things to be controversial or pejorative, but let me give you. Let's look over across the pond at European cities for a second and understand that your typical European city is going to have people that are liberal, progressive in their mindset, and people who would be considered conservative in their mindset. When you look at these dispositions, they're kind of not opposition dispositions as much as they are like yin and yang. They kind of need each other. They kind of go together. Conservatives are very good and very sensitive to how fragile cities can be, how fragile places can be, how disorder and chaos actually sows its own seeds and reinforces itself. And when you have conservatives in your conversation, you tend to have a lot of respect for not only tradition and hierarchy, but also just, a kind of dedication to order and keeping things running. The progressive instinct is not the opposite of that. Like I said, it's a yin and yang. It is an examination of, where these hierarchies and where these approaches become despotic, where they go too far, where they create, negative circumstances that impact people in ways that are unjust. I feel like the more we allow cities to merely be the domain of the progressive and the progressive mindset, the more we get cities that are increasingly dysfunctional. And I don't say that because I think liberals are bad or liberals should be driven out of cities. But a lot of the things that we see in cities today are not the results of a lack of wealth or a lack of capacity, but they're really about something else. And yeah, I think the reaction of many people would be, well, if I don't have to live there, I'm going to move out. I think that our cities need to do a better job of managing and running themselves because, quite frankly, Paris today, Rome today, these are places that have had huge amounts of coronavirus. They're very safe, wonderful places to be. American cities are not.
All right. Well, we'll get more into that, too, and answer a few more of your questions here on Radio Free New York, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
A reminder from Abate Monroe County. American bikers aim toward education. Distracted driving is dangerous, so pull over and eat. Don't try to read your mail and newspaper, and stay off your cell phone. Make a mental note to be more alert, making it a habit to expect the unexpected. Remember to look twice. Save a life. Train yourself to watch for motorcycles which are harder to see. Join Abate, and your family will be protected with a free $4,000 accident policy. Ride safe. Ride free, ride often. Abate. If you ride with us. Google Abate Monroe County.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Mr. Charles Marohn from Strong Towns. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. Thank you, everyone, for the questions that have started coming in since the last segment. But I do want to wrap up some of the discussion from John's question from last segment. And just to say that it is interesting to see that European cities and other cities across the world seem to have responded to coronavirus effectively in a way that American cities haven't. But we are seeing some shifts in how people use public space to try to do that. And, and I include this in my original pitch to try to get you on the show. But, the city of Rochester is doing a thing where we're taking out parking spaces in some areas and expanding that into dining space and opening or closing off some streets to make them pedestrian only spaces. Are these the type of kind of small bets and changes that you're looking at Strong Towns to kind of rethink public space and rethink city life?
Yes, I mean, without a doubt. And let me just say this: the most expensive thing that we do in the core of our cities is to use space for parking. Parking is very expensive to build and maintain, and it generally produces little to no revenue. I mean, if you have parking fees, if they cover the expenses of actually sustaining, the enforcement mechanism, you're doing better than most cities. And so parking is a net loss because you don't have the place, you don't have tax base. You're giving up wealth that you could otherwise build and use just to store a vehicle. This is ridiculously expensive. So anything we can do to start incrementally shifting over to a pattern of development that is less reliant on people driving everywhere and actually gives more options for people to get around without an automobile, you're creating financial windfalls for yourself. That is the truth of our core, development pattern. So yeah, things like outdoor seating, outdoor marketplaces, converting parking into restaurant space or even retail space. These are advancements that, if we want to look across at European cities, they would look at as silly because, they've been doing this for decades. We're now just figuring it out, and it's kind of becoming a fad in some places. But these are generally good moves, yes.
Yeah. And, and I just on the flip side of that, too, I've seen businesses get not approved to open. They've been, in some cases, unable to expand because they weren't able to meet the minimum parking requirements. And it's so frustrating to see that. Like, oh, this was a cool coffee shop that was supposed to come to my neighborhood, and they can't now because they can't knock out a building to build, however many parking spaces they need. It's ridiculous.
And understand, parking in that sense, what you're saying, what the business is saying is we want more space for more patrons. And what is the pushback is that we need more places to park then, because we don't want to inconvenience anyone who's currently parking in this area.
Yeah. And actually,
what you're
it segues.
saying then is that I want higher taxes, I want lower services. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it might have cut out there for a second, but I did want to segue into another question. I think it transitions well. Is Adrian from the Rochester Urbanist groups is asking about how do cities deal with like transportation issues as it relates to being a snowy city. Rochester is one of the snowiest cities in the U.S. Everyone likes to having a nice warm car and getting around and being nice and close to places. So how do we address those issues?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, what do you think the peak year for Rochester was? If we look back in history and we say, when was Rochester at its apex? That was way before people were driving around in automobiles. I live in the central part of Minnesota. It gets very, very cold here. And I hear the same thing. You know where else I hear it? Louisiana. They say it's too hot here to walk. It's too hot here to have cars, to not drive everywhere. I think that we have a recency bias. And the reality is people for centuries got around in deep snow, they got around in cold, they got around in hot, and they did it just fine. It's difficult in the layout we have today, but like I said, that layout is under challenge. It's under duress. We're going to be giving up parts of that. And so I think the idea of making like marginal improvements to make our places more walkable and having more people who would walk instead of drive is not something we should fear because, oh my gosh, I don't want to drive or I don't want to walk everywhere. That's fine. But you know what? There's a lot of people who do, and they're going to drive that market revolution.
Now, many of the listeners in our listening area, they live in some of these small towns. Can that work there too, or does it only work in big cities?
It works even better in small towns, quite frankly. I mean, really, small towns have an urgency that big cities don't because there's less slack in the system. Small towns need to be thinking about this as an urgent imperative because the big cities are going to walk away from them. And the smaller you are, the more dependent you are on those state and federal subsidies that I think are going to be in limited supply in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think we might have time for like one more question. Yeah, Eric Cooper says, when you make reforms to become a strong town, will it result in dramatic growth? And you talked a lot about incremental growth. How do you relieve development pressure into incrementalism? So like the development side, and I got a question sort of like this the other day too, who they're like, the incentives are all to build big. How do we change those incentives where people are willing to kind of make those smaller bets, those incremental changes to
Let's be clear.
the place we live?
Incremental does not mean small. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean slow. It just means by many hands. And so, Rochester grew very robustly. The cities in upstate New York grew very robustly during a period of time, but it was all incremental growth. It was done by many hands over a broad area. What we do now is we say only large players get to grow in our cities, get to make investments, and those investments are all going to be big. I would like to see 1,000, incremental investments as opposed to, a dozen big investments. That's the difference. It's not a matter of not being able to meet demand. In fact, I think you meet demand even better working incrementally.
Fantastic. So not the big, massive projects, but a lot of small stuff going on. That's growth. That's still going to be substantial, and it's going to be more resilient and stable over time.
Without a doubt, yes.
Fantastic. Now, we only got like a minute and a half left, so where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Strong Towns?
Our website's strongtowns.org. And like I said, we publish 3 articles a day and got multiple podcast streams. If you're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we're in all these places and, have a very robust conversation going on there. Welcome anyone to join in and be part of that. We just, are trying to have this conversation and trying to have people share this information. And so plug in wherever is convenient for you. We'll be there.
Yeah, excellent. And, for those listening to the station, I've been following this for a while. The conservatives, liberals, progressives, everyone's kind of like going together. And how do we have conversations about building better cities, building better towns, building, financially sustainable and resilient infrastructure? And I think that we all need to be a part of that. So, Chuck Marohn, thank you so much for being here today on Radio Free New York.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
All right, we'll be back Monday. Talk to you next week.